Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This week's video, we're going to cover a movie that recently released and the game that it was based on, and how they're more connected than you might realize. I'm talking about Markiplier's new film, Iron Lung. I want to start by saying I really enjoyed the movie. I think it's very well made, especially for a rookie director like Markiplier. I went in expecting it to be fine, but it really excelled in a couple of areas. It did a great job creating dread and creating tension. My only criticism was sometimes the audio felt a little muddy, like it was hard to hear certain narration at certain points, but Markiplier put out a reel or a YouTube video talking about how apparently some theaters didn't have the audio mixed correctly, and I think I just, got unlucky with my theater. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I recommend you go see it, because not only is it just a great movie and a great adaptation, it's also a really great time for YouTubers like myself who have a background working in film, have worked on sets, and want to use my platform on YouTube to, expand that and possibly make my own films. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some of the lore featured within Iron Lung the game, and then talk about the movie and how I think that the Iron Lung video game is a direct prequel to the movie. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, we're going to talk about some of the characters within the Iron Lung game. First things first, we know that the player within the game is a prisoner of the Consolidation of Iron working in the Conviction Realization program that they have. The only other character besides the initial narration that we get that tells you what your ultimate goal is the unknown convict. The unknown convict is the convict that used this specific Iron Lung before your character. It's likely that they died of oxygen deprivation as a form of suicide because of a note that they leave behind. Now, the note is very similar to one that is featured within the movie, and we'll get back to that later. But the note goes as follows: "This is not an expedition, it's an execution. When they put you in here, they don't want you to return. And even if you do, and even if they keep their promises, what freedom awaits you? A few dying ships and a sea of dead stars? If there is still hope, it lies beyond the veil. Hope in this void is as illusionary as the starlight. I will choose to breathe my last here at the bottom of an ocean, unseen, unheard, and uncontrolled. They will get their execution, and I will get my freedom." This exact dialogue is heard within the movie as well, and I will address that later in the video. Next, we're going to talk about the terminal entries. Now, I've organized these terminal entries roughly in chronological order so we can learn more about the world of Iron Lung and its history before we get into the theorizing at the end of the video. I won't be reading the terminal entries verbatim, but I'll put them up on the screen, and there's also full documented versions of them on the game's Wikipedia, among other things. The terminal can be found within the Iron Lung. To quickly praise the movie again, I think the reveal of the terminal was really well done. When I first played Iron Lung, it was before the terminal was added, so I didn't really know it was a thing. I had played Iron Lung initially, really enjoyed it, and then I kind of went along. I did watch some lore videos and some videos about the gameplay mechanics, but I was unaware until researching this video and seeing the movie that there was a whole terminal with all this new lore. In the film, the way that the terminal is revealed is by playing with the light. You can barely see it pop in for a second with the flash of the photographs. And I thought that was really great because it made me, as someone who was somewhat familiar but somewhat not, really intrigued as to what could be on there. And I can only imagine for people who were unfamiliar with the game how interesting that was, and still how it was a good reveal for those who know everything about the game. The terminal functions in a really interesting way. You actually have to type in specific keywords and phrases in order to find these entries. It reminds me a little bit of the Lethal Company terminal, how the interface really works within the game. It's a very immersive interface. We learned from researching Mars that it was the first place that humanity colonized, around the year 1992. The entry mentions that Mars was the most populated planet within our solar system, not Earth, and that it actually surpassed Earth in 143 EIC, which we will get to in a second. EIC stands for Epoch of Interplanetary Colonization. This started in 1992 when humanity colonized Mars, and it was essentially a reset for how we date things. So think about it this way: 1992 AD stops and becomes 0 EIC. and it's however many hundreds of years removed from that, you just add on to that. It is the most widely used measurement of time and calendar throughout the galaxy, even though it does have its critics. Apparently there's a subset of people who want to use something called IMC. IMC is the Interstellar Martian Calendar. The IMC uses the rotation of Mars in its calendar rather than the rotation of Earth like AD and BC would have. Mars actually adopted IMC as their official calendar shortly before the Quiet Rapture. What this tells me is that throughout the galaxy, throughout the different colonies run by humanity, we're splintering more and more. The people of Mars have their own faith, their own feelings, their own, political opinions, and then other places have their own. They're creating identities around where they've colonized. It's not just humanity anymore. It appears that EIC is used by the Consolidation of Iron. I say this because one of the only space stations that uses IMC is Eden, and they don't exactly have a great relationship with the Consolidation of Iron. We can also guess that the date that Iron Lung the game takes place is 5-378 in EIC. The Quiet Rapture. The Quiet Rapture is an event that happened within the Iron Lung universe that kind of sets everything into motion. Pretty much everything disappeared. All of a sudden, people lost radio contact, there were no visual notes of what happened, and nobody experienced anything strange. It's just all of a sudden, where the planets were, they are now gone. Specifically, planets that had livable atmospheres, sentient beings, fauna, things like that, were completely gone. The only things left behind are uninhabitable planets, asteroids, and things like that, as well as some space station. My personal theory for what the Quiet Rapture is some sort of black hole event. The other thing that the movie posits that I also think is very interesting is, doesn't it make more sense that the space stations have been taken somewhere else rather than entire planets? But that's just a theory very quickly poised by the movie. I don't know how much basis it would have. Now, I've mentioned this faction, the Consolidation of Iron, and the faction Eden. What exactly is it? Well, the Consolidation of Iron is a brotherhood/alliance between 3 space stations and 2 spacecraft. They use a system of collectivism as well as popular vote to govern themselves. The name Consolidation of Iron is for the iron and steel that is used in the construction of the space stations and spacecrafts that they occupy. They felt that they needed to unite in order to combat factions like Eden. Eden is one of the last remaining Martian space stations. It is specifically noted as a Martian space station. It is the largest single space station left in the universe, essentially. Because of so many Martian citizens living on Eden, there's still a strong sense of, quote, Martian patriotism, which I think is really interesting because it leans into what I said earlier and what we can kind of gather from this stage of humanity's expansion, which is that we're becoming less of humanity and more of Martians, more of moonmen. We are identifying more with the planets that we grew up on rather than our own species. It seems that Eden and the Consolidation of Iron do have some neutral ground throughout the universe, different space stations that they both occupy simultaneously. It could also just be that some people align themselves with these groups even though they may not live on their specific station. Filament Station was a specifically Consolidation of Iron station. However, it did house some Eden citizens, or people who at least aligned with those beliefs. At around 362 EIC, tensions erupted between Eden and the Consolidation of Iron, leading to a skirmish. This battle came to an end when Eden forces sabotaged the station's reactor, causing a breach and pretty much destroying the entire station. This is absolutely devastating. There are no longer any habitable planets. The space stations are all we have left. We don't have the resources to build more. So the fact that we have lost an entire space station is massive. And this is why the Consolidation of Iron has such a hatred for Eden, beyond their other religious ideas that are somewhat expanded on within the movie. We also know that the character Simon from the Iron Lung movie was at this battle. As I said, this led to the Conviction Realization Program the COI operates. This is basically a way that criminals can repay their debts by doing things that are considered positive for society, whether it's work or, in the case of this game, going into the Iron Lung. However, it seems that the Iron Lung is specifically reserved for people involved with the attack on Filament Station and is used more as an execution than anything really of value. There's no ultimate end goal for them. This idea of paying back for what they did is really interesting because one of the entries, the entry for Filament Station, notes that the convicts are expected to be able to fully pay back for what they did by 381 EIC. Next, we have the blood oceans themselves. This phenomenon only showed up after the Quiet Rapture. Beforehand, this had never ever happened before. There are 4 moons in total that have blood oceans, but the most important are moons At5 and Z8, because these moons in particular are under the control of the COI. The ocean of At5, which is the moon that the game and film take place on, it says, the ocean on At5 is of particular interest because redacted. And even the entire entry for moon At5 is fully redacted. There are multiple different kinds of submarines that are used to explore these blood moons. The first one I'll talk about is the SM-13. The SM-13 is the Iron Lung. It is something that has been thrown together haphazardly and is easily replaceable with the limited resources that are available to the COI. The SM-8, on the other hand, is likely the first ever submarine that was used, and it's one that was meant to come back. What I mean by that is it was a full research vessel. It wasn't a death trap like the SM-13 is. However, the SM-8 was fully destroyed by something. It appears to be ripped in half when you find it within the game. There's a very interesting entry about the SM-8 that I have labeled under secret stuff that is from before you enter and explains that, they're lying to you about what truly happened. Basically, this entry just exposes that not all subs are the same, that there are burner subs like the one that you're in, and that the SM-8 was a league ahead, and also that they have 3 burner subs. So that gives us an interesting thing to work with going forward. Finally, to wrap it up with terminal entries, there's something really funny called a behavior warning, where if you type in any profanity, the COI, like a little error message will pop up that basically says, hey, we expect you to be professional and blah, 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 blah. So I just thought that was neat. So this all leads me to my theory, how Iron Lung the game is a direct prequel to Iron Lung the movie. First things first, the lore itself lines up. As far as I can remember, everything lines up fairly well. Now, I will say, I haven't been able to watch the movie for a second time. I don't want to pirate it or encourage pirating, and I haven't had time to go back to the theater to take notes during it. But to the best of my memory and to others I've spoken to about the movie, it lines up very well. And also considering how involved the original creator was, I'm sure the intention was to have these things go hand in hand. The thing that makes me really think that the game is a direct prequel and that you're even in the same submarine is the terminal. In the game, the terminal can be activated no problem. There's no note that tells you to twist the wires or do anything like that. However, in the movie, it's fully disabled and Simon has to essentially jerry-rig it. I think that what happened is that your character was digging through the files, was looking at all the entries, like you probably have done in your playthrough. I think that when they recovered the submarine, or at the very least the black box from your submarine, because we know they have 3 burners, they saw the activity on the terminal and decided to fully disable it. And then the person who came afterwards is the twist the wires guy, figured out how to turn the terminal back on, disabled it really quickly before he also committed suicide. This is also where I want to address the similar entries that we get between the movie and the film, specifically the note that we get from the unknown convict in the game and the audio message that we get from the Twist the Wires guy. They are very, very similar, if not exactly alike. Now, some people could take that to mean that the game is more of an adaptation, like a direct adaptation of the game, and doesn't take place within the same universe, that it's just 2 adaptations of the same thing. However, I disagree. we know how patriotic and hardcore people who come from Mars and people who come from Eden can be. The film expands on this almost religious idea that they have and the way that their culture is organized. I believe that the notes themselves being very similar is more of a product of this almost cult-like patriotic mentality that they all think very, very similarly about what they are here to do and what their freedom is. They all have this greater sense of what comes next. So it could be that they're just reusing the same thing as if it's some sort of mantra among them and almost a protest. Think of it this way, wouldn't it do more damage to the COI if they stuck you in this thing and then you did nothing and you simply waited on your own to die, and that was that? It would waste their time, it would waste their energy, and it's one more sort of screw you to them. And I think with how extreme these people are portrayed to be in the film, as well as how patriotic and the emphasis on the Martian patriotism, I think that goes hand in hand very well, that they would think very similarly about that. Now, the other thing is, this relies on them recovering some of the submarines, and I think there's a precedent for that. Number one, there's only 3 submarines. They need to be very smart about how they use them. The other thing is, the note that we find in the game is something that was left inside the submarine, right? Which means that they would have had to recover it despite the fact that he was sitting at the bottom of the blood ocean. This shows us that they have the capability to recover the submarines if needed. So to paint the picture like this, I think this is how the game directly connects to the movie. Before you, the player, are in the Iron Lung, there's someone right before you. They simply sit at the bottom of the ocean, write this note, and end their own life. It's possible that they were inspired by a note that they had found previously because of the kind of indoctrination and the kind of dedication that the people who were at Filament Station have. It's something that they read and they go, yes, this is the way that my brothers have went out, and I'm going to follow in their footsteps. Then the player comes, and the player digs through the files on the terminal and ultimately are killed by the frog creature. Then the consolidation of iron either recovers the black box or recovers the entire submarine and brings it back. Once they look through the files, they discover that the convict was digging through files that they shouldn't have, and that there were notes and entries that exposed some of their secrets. So what did they do? They couldn't waste time fully taking out the whole thing, so they simply disabled it, cut the wires, and made it inoperable. Then comes the guy who tells you to cross the wires. He gets placed in the same submarine that has now been recovered, repaired, and essentially slapped back together to say, okay, we need you to go find more stuff. Because I don't think they would be satisfied with just the findings that, hey, there is a frog creature down there, because that's not the big bad that we see in the movie. So I think they would keep going, keep going, keep going. So he's in the submarine, he finds the terminal, breaks it open, figures out how to cross the wires and get it to work again, and leaves his own entry after finding the note from the first game, and then quickly disables it, makes it look like nothing happens, and then hides that little tree thing and ends his own life. Once again, because of this frustration building that these religious fanatics, the people from Eden, the Martians, whatever you want to call them, are constantly sabotaging them, the consolidation of iron is getting more and more and more fed up. They put in Simon, and this would also explain why they are so hostile towards him from the very beginning, unlike in the game, because they've sent so many down, and what have they done? They have either gotten themselves killed or they have killed themselves. They've sabotaged equipment. So it explains that by the time of Simon going down, they're so angry and they're so frustrated, which then leads to Simon finding the note that tells him to cross the wires. He finds the terminal entry that repeats the same mantra that his people, his religion, his home has been saying about one more way to stick it to them. We're going to be at peace on our own in the afterlife, that kind of thing. But he doesn't go along with it, which then leads to the events of the movie. So let me know what you guys think of my overall picture that I've painted about Iron Lung and how the game is possibly a direct prequel to the movie. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you seen Iron Lung? Did you enjoy it? Please let me know. I really, really liked it, and it's something I really enjoyed. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a good morning or evening or, whatever.